Awesome. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I am here today with Jen Mbanu, with Jen Mbanu Wellness. This is Sahara with Club Imani for BFRB's OCD and related disorders. A little bit more about Club Imani. We're a movement for collective healing. We're bridging research, art, and radical care to cultivate healthful futures for all, particularly multicultural communities with BFRB's OCD, and related disorders. I first got in contact with Jen via social media on Instagram, and then we had a more formal conversation, and I decided to invite her to kind of do a fireside chat with us. But we've pivoted. Now we're kind of doing more of a podcast episode, but nonetheless, Jen has a lot of experience in this space, and I wanted to, yeah, sit down and have a more formal chat about her experience, a little bit about her business and about her journey with trichotillomania. So I want to give Jen an opportunity to introduce herself. So Jen, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background.
Saharra, thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your community and, quite frankly, to be a part of your community as a person of a multicultural background who has lived with trichotillomania for 35 years. So, thank you for the invitation. I'm looking forward to the conversation. So by way of just general introduction, Jen Mbanu, I'm 47 years old. I live in Indiana, which is where I'm originally from. I grew up in West Lafayette, find myself in Indianapolis now, but I've returned to the state after about 15 years of living in different states all around the country. So find myself back in Indianapolis. I'm married. I have three children, two of my own with my husband and a stepdaughter who's living her life off in Chicago. We're about to be empty nesters, so we're kind of in that phase of getting the last one out the door. So that's by way of just my personal life. I actually joined Instagram and kind of started talking with this community quite a bit about 18 months ago as the Tricky Gardener. So some of you may have recalled that account floating out there. And my goal with that account was to show that despite living with body focused repetitive behaviors, we absolutely can build these big, beautiful lives. And I chose to center my message around my hobby, which was gardening. And for me, as someone who lives with trichotillomania, the entire package of that hobby is being outside, keeping your hands busy, doing something
Mhm.
that you can kind of get into that trance-like state and find that an hour or 2 hours has passed, only you have something productive to show for it. And so when I kind of came on as the tricky gardener, it was let me help demonstrate that trichotillomania took nothing from me.
Mhm.
Everything I ever said I wanted, to be married, to find a partner, to have kids, to raise a family, all those things, right? It didn't stop me. And
Yeah.
I think that is, without starting at the end, that's the message. So professionally, and actually I'll start more with my, I guess, trichotillomania maybe and how that appeared in my life at first. Um, I was 13 years old when I began pulling my hair from the top of my head, and it felt like an interesting hobby, to be honest. I remember laying on my bedroom floor in my childhood room. I had long, curly hair, and I would just kind of start pulling at it. And after a while, I noticed there was the root at the end, and I thought it was cool, and I showed my little sister. And I say that to demonstrate that as a 13-year-old child, I really didn't initially see this as something that was a problem.
Mhm.
Um, it wasn't until I started noticing other people's reactions, and by other people, I mean my parents, my mom finding long clumps of hair, in the vacuum cleaner, my dad gasping at a family holiday party when he was sitting on a couch behind me and I was on the floor, and he finally saw the bald spot that my mom had been telling him about. Um, and so that's when the shame set in.
Mhm.
And it became something that I just had to hide. I didn't know why I was doing it. I didn't understand why I couldn't stop, but I
Yeah.
knew it was bad or wrong and it was upsetting the people in my life and I needed to stop.
Mm.
So, and we all know how that goes
Yeah.
with trichotillomania, and it didn't quite happen in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think you bring up, I know we connected before about the tricky gardener and just doing things that you love still that keep you busy and really leaning into that. And I think I told you when we first chatted, I was in farm-based therapy for like about a year, last year or 2 years ago. I was just in it for a year, and it really, I've always loved animals. I've always loved being out in nature. And I think, especially as Black women, um, we can kind of get like gaffes or people kind of staring like, oh, like, why are you like, you like being outside? You like being around all those like animals? You like doing this, getting your hands dirty? But I genuinely do. And I think a lot of Black folks and a lot of people of color who maybe come from cultures where maybe like hiking or being out in nature or gardening, or farming, being with like livestock and what have you is a little bit more like, oh, questionable.
Scratch some
But
hips.
yes, it was like talk therapy, but also it was just so interesting to be able to have a place to go where I could like cuddle the animals and like, be with the alpacas and the little guinea pigs. And it really did spark my interest again for like animals. And I was like, you know what? When I get older, I'd love to have a little bit of like farmland and just like have a animal or two. And I love gardening and things of that nature. And it's so interesting that you kind of, yeah, you bring that up. And I'm not sure if other people with trick or with dermatillomania are thinking that way, but I think it really, there's something interesting that we can learn about ourselves when we kind of really attune with nature, when we attune, with the environment and with animals as well. Uh,
Yeah.
and then,
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point. Whether we're talking about Black folks or people with mental health conditions or things like trichotillomania, body
Mhm.
focused repetitive behaviors, don't let people put you in boxes.
Yeah,
Right?
for
So
sure.
there are cultural things, there are stigmas, there are things we think when we think of how, the things we're supposed to like and the things we're supposed to do. And I think
Mhm.
that is an excellent kind of
Yeah.
observation or point to make is that, yeah, don't put us in boxes, that we really can be attracted to and good at a lot of things. And one of the
Mhm.
things I've learned from plugging into the BFRB community, we have so many artistic people. I mean,
Yeah.
the amount of brain power, and you're a great example of that with Club Imani, but telling people stories.
Yeah.
And I'm watching, and it's artists and tattoo artists
Mhm.
and singers and writers and people doing these beautiful things and didn't let the mental health condition stop
Yeah.
them. Even
Yeah.
though maybe some people thought, well, man, if you're depressed, you can't do that. Or if you suffer from chronic anxiety, you can't do that. And so
Mhm.
I think, yeah, let's all be out there demonstrating that we can build these big, beautiful lives despite our cultural backgrounds, our physical appearance, or the things we struggle with on a daily
Mhm.
basis.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, that's really spot on. And the other thing I really wanted to say was, as I continue to talk to people, I have trichotillomania as well. And I also started pulling around 10, 11, but around that kind of age of puberty, adolescence. And your story sounds very similar to mine and to a lot of other people's that I hear of, they started pooling or they started picking and they really had no awareness around like this is a disordered behavior until the other people in their lives started making them feel that shame and that stigma. It's very, very similar to me. My grandfather and my mom were definitely the people for me who I was like, okay, I'm starting to understand it. Like this thing that I feel like is helping me kind of regulate, whether I knew it at the time or not, um, is actually something that makes other people wildly uncomfortable. And it's interesting because when you're a 10-year-old, having to kind of sit at that juxtaposition is really heavy when you really think about it, of trying to kind of mold yourself and shape yourself in a way that is more palatable for other people, whether
Yeah.
it's friends, family, and yeah, so it's just very interesting, especially the women that I talk to, um, who start pulling or picking around the 10 to 13 age. It's a very similar story. And so I just wanted to say I definitely resonate with that. And I think a lot of people in our audience would resonate as well.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky time. I mean, it's you look back to being that age and it's like what was great about that, right? You're in middle school, you're it's all the stuff. And so if I think when I've tried to tease out those early years where kind
Hmm.
of it started as that self-soothing and for me boredom, that seems to
Yeah.
be a common thread throughout my life.
Hmm.
That when I'm bored, I find myself doing things to kind of regulate. And we're
Yeah.
all trying to kind of get to that equilibrium of not overwhelmed or overstimulated, but not underwhelmed or with nothing to do. There kind of
Right.
seems for a lot of us to be this baseline that if we can keep ourselves kind of in that space,
Hmm.
that it's helpful. But yes, it's kind of when the behavior starts, you don't realize it's problematic. You then react to other people's reactions to it, and the shame sets in. Then you wander off to middle school and high school where all you want to do is fit in or especially not stick out. And I'll say about my background, I'm biracial and I grew up in a almost all white community and school.
Hmm.
And so talk about, you're the only person who looks like you at school. You already have hair, even if I wasn't pulling it out, my hair was different than all the other
Hmm.
girls. And
Yeah.
I found myself, why doesn't my hair lay down straight and flat all day long without getting big and poofy, right? Like I was
Right.
just, when you're 13 and you're 14 and you're not really thinking about it, and then you start a habit that makes people wildly uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And that it creates all this shame and that kind of thing. So it's moving through all those emotional pieces of realizing you're different and then when you realize you're different and puberty hits and you want to fit in and you suddenly decide you want to stop and
Yeah.
you can't, that for me is where I think the disorder part of it, if I'm being
Yeah.
honest. The
Yeah.
disorder part of it was when I made the decision that, oh, wow, this is something I really don't want to be a part of
Hmm.
my life. I'm going to stop, you know, and setting the goal and starting to count the days and doing the things. Um, which never worked. It was ever, right? Until you just have to shift the way you think about recovery,
Yeah.
or at
Yeah.
least, and I'm speaking, just from my experience. But yes, I think there's definitely a component to that. Our backgrounds, the age we are when we kind of enter
Hmm.
that space, the other things we're struggling with, being women of color out in the world, a world that wasn't necessarily built for us. Um, it's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot to kind of to
Yeah.
marry and to navigate through.
Yeah. You bring up, and I'm like taking notes here just so I remember, because I also have ADHD. So I will get a
I'm
really
with
good
you.
idea
I'm
and
with
then
you.
it'll go. So I have my little notepad here. But you know, you bring up a good point, and it reminded me um of expectations and having to alter or tailor expectations even from like a very young age, like you're saying, once I realized, okay, this is making people uncomfortable, and actually, you know what, I maybe don't love the idea of me having bald spots, I'm going to stop doing this. And then, like you said, that is kind of where the disordered nature comes from, because it's now this thing where, hey, this is actually much harder to stop. And how do I stop? And I'm getting frustrated because I can't stop. And now there's this cycle of frustration and relief from the hair pulling. And now it's just kind of a whole thing. And it really kind of speaks to the complexity of these behaviors. I think a lot of people really just think of BFRB specifically as just kind of like little behaviors. If I really try hard enough, I can stop. It really is about willpower, and it really isn't. And when even just hearing your story here and thinking about my own story, it's like I don't think people really understand the complexity of
Yes.
BFRBs and how they show up and how oftentimes they can be comorbid. You said something about for you, it's boredom. And so kind of looking at the different ways in which BFRBs are being used for different people, it really is something that's truly, truly complex. And I think that's definitely something that I want people to really understand that like it really is, community is important
Yes.
and sharing your story is important and also really understanding how it's showing up for you so you can tailor your expectations and also tailor your kind of action plan around your goals. Which leads me to my next question. um, Very curious. Okay, so you're starting to pull at 13. Talk to me a little bit as you're getting older, you're moving into adolescence, you're moving into teenhood and you're moving into young adulthood. You're a little older than I am, and so I'm sure the resources that were available for me maybe weren't necessarily available for you. So tell me a little bit about how you started really understanding and coming to understand, this is a mental health disorder, and being in community with other people who had trichotillomania or BFRBs.
Yeah, I would say, and you're absolutely right. In 1996 and 1997, the resources that were available in the way of figuring this out was very different. Um, but where I'll end up with, and where I wish I'd gotten to quicker, was the
Hmm.
community piece. It was a long time before I found community in this.
Yeah.
So in 1997, moving into or 1996, I moved into the dorms, but had to start living with someone, had to start being in close quarters in with a roommate at school. And that was when the first time I noticed, oh, anxiety. Before it always just felt like, oh, I have this weird habit. I have this
Mm,
weird habit, and then yes, it makes me uncomfortable. So now I'm kind of shrinking and I'm shying and I'm covering and I'm hiding. So there was
hmm.
all of that through high school. But it wasn't until I was forced to live in close quarters with others that anxiety about it just kind of came through. And so I remember going down to the computer lab, didn't have a cell phone, didn't have a computer in my room, went down to the freshman dorm computer lab, and actually, I don't even think Google. I don't think I Googled. In fact, it might have been at the library computer. I think that was what it was. I have to really think about it sometimes. I was at the library computer and just put in hair pulling. That's the only thing I knew to
Oh,
put in hair pulling, and trichotillomania popped up. And there
wow.
was a book, I don't remember if it was maybe the DSM-5 or if it was some other big book about mental health where trichotillomania was mentioned in like this one line kind of way,
Hmm.
as this hair pulling disorder. And the amount of relief that
Mm,
flooded over my body when I saw that word, because immediately I thought the next step was, okay, well, I've self-diagnosed. Now all I have to do is go find, the psychiatrist or the therapist that of course is going to know all about this. I'm sure there's a medication. I'm sure, there's something
yeah.
we can do. I was excited. I
Yeah.
was a 19-year-old ready to go, and found my first, looked at my insurance and found the therapist that my dad's plan would cover, and went. And it was this, I still remember him, this older, much older than me, white man, who picked his fingernails through the whole meeting, which is interesting now that I think about that.
Yeah.
And clearly had never heard of this. Had
Mm.
clearly never heard of this. Put me on Prozac,
Oh, wow.
which then just, yep, met me once. But I was
Okay.
I was there for it. I was like, give me the thing
Yeah.
that's going to stop the hair pulling. And
Yeah.
so I took the Prozac, and what that ended up doing is when you're someone who has bipolar tendencies
Hmm.
and you're given something like Prozac, it can spin you into mania. And
Mm,
that's what happened. So my
mm.
very first attempt at finding the magic pill that would help me not pull out my hair ended up
Wow.
spinning me into what I learned later was my first hypomanic episode.
Wow.
Yes. And so I went off of that. And for years then, just on again, off again, different medications, trying talk therapy, getting fidget toys, doing all of these things. And it always felt like white knuckling. And I
Mm.
can white knuckle something for a little bit, right? Like
Yeah.
if I was really working hard, I
Hmm.
could white knuckle my way through periods, through pull free periods.
Hmm.
Um, but what happened was it never lasted. And then I started struggling with depression
Mm,
because when you're now, 5 years into doing, having this kind of distressing behavior, you've
yeah,
realized, oh, I can't stop. And yes, there's a name for it, but nobody knows what to do with that.
right,
And I think it was not until 2 years later that I found the TLC Foundation. I, again, just kind of maybe Google had someone will have to
right.
fact check me on when Google came about. But at some point, I did a search and found the TLC Foundation. And that was when I finally found community. But we're
Yeah.
talking, I mean, I was in my early 30s
Mm,
before I really started engaging, going to conferences, trying to find other people.
yeah.
It was really a long road. And we know now that community is so important in shattering that stigma, that shame, that feeling that we're alone. Um, Things get so much better when you realize, oh, I'm not the only person. Then it switches and it becomes, what's the solution for me? And
Mm,
that's the work, right? That's the
mm,
work for all of us, and we're all different.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we've got to figure out, what does recovery look like for us? Get clear on our goals. What is our goal? It's going to be different for everyone. And
Yeah.
then do the work of finding a recovery plan that works for you so that you can build that big, beautiful life
Mm,
and
mm.
those symptoms can kind of be in the back seat.
Okay. Yeah. Very interesting that we are not the same age and yet very similar story, albeit I found the resources a little bit earlier in that I think I found the word for trichotillomania in high school, but given that I was in high school, given that I was still under my parents' roof, and given that I came from a very like hyper religious um family community, who really shied away from talking about mental health, kind of viewed mental illness as like demons and fighting demons and whatnot. And so for me, asking to like go see a therapist or asking to go to the doctor to talk about this thing was kind of like, no, we're not going to spend any time talking about this because it's going to make it real. And why would you want that to kind of be your reality? And so for me, when I got to college, similar to you, I started living in close quarters with my roommate, who has turned into one of my best friends, and sorority sisters. And, it was one of those things where I really had to kind of practice like telling other people about this thing. And it was wildly uncomfortable, but also very liberating. And I think for me, that is kind of where I started really getting interested in kind of telling stories about your journey, whether it's mental health or not. And some people still might be really uncomfortable with sharing different tidbits of information, but for me, it was very liberating. And after I told her, I was like, oh, great. Like I get to show up how I can show up. I don't have to necessarily hide. I told her how I can how what support I really wanted, what worked, what didn't work in terms of like helping kind of like reel me in if I'm in an episode. Um, and and yet, I still feel like even though I had found the TLC Foundation, and I was telling my friends, I was still not in community with people who picked or pulled. And so for me, the community building aspect, I feel like really came when I started what now is Club Imani, but what used to be a support group or just solely a support group. And I found that I had to kind of be the one, and I'm sure there were other support groups that I could have joined, but just given where I was in the world and what I was looking for, I couldn't find it. So I really appreciate you kind of sharing that, and just want to say, yeah, it definitely resonates with my journey as well. And it's very interesting that even still to this day, there are a lot of clinicians who don't know about BFRB, trichotillomania, dermatillomania, and hearing the harmfulness, which I'm sure he didn't go into it trying to cause more harm, but just the harm that was kind of inflicted on you when kind of prescribing the Prozac, and how that kind of set you on this path of, figuring more stuff out about yourself. And for me, when I was first diagnosed with trich, um, I felt really good. I was like, yes, I already knew this about me, but like, yes, now I feel like I'm going to get all these resources. And then there was this like high and low of like, wait, all the resources are is just me talking to a therapist. Like I want more. And so again, reeling in, having to settle my expectations. We know obviously now that there is no magic cure, magic pill. I am on antidepressants for other reasons. I don't think it necessarily has helped with my hair pulling, but it has helped me feel great in other aspects of my life. In terms
Yes.
of managing my depression and my crippling anxiety.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just, it's one of those things where it's just very interesting. But even still, I remember as I got older, I realized I was like, you know what? I think there's more than just the trichotillomania and generalized anxiety. I feel like they kind of just slapped the generalized anxiety diagnosis on me because they didn't really know what else to do or like search for. But as I moved on in life, I realized I was like, oh, I have ADHD and I also have PMDD and also this thing, and they all kind of like ebb and flow together. And once I realized how all of these different things were working together to kind of create this perfect storm, I was able to really get clear on like how is Saharra showing up in this world? What supports does Saharra need showing up in this world, and being the best version of myself? And also, I was able to like show myself a lot more grace than I had ever
Yeah.
been able to. So I think there is power in the diagnosis and speaking with other people who share the same diagnoses.
Yeah.
Um, and talking to people who maybe have other comorbidities because it's like, hey, yeah, like this is the thing, this is the reality.
Yeah. I think that's what a lot of us are doing. I mean, you said a lot of really great things there. And I think a couple of the things that I picked out of it um, were that a lot of times we have these questions and there's no one out there to answer them for us. And so we
Hmm.
start doing the work ourselves.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned starting your support group, and maybe it wasn't that there wasn't another support group or something, but you felt called
Yeah.
to, once you realized that sharing with your roommate or telling your story was freeing for you personally. It might not be for everyone, but for you, for me, for many others in the community, as soon as you say it out loud to another person who shows
Hmm.
you grace and compassion, it breaks some of that power over you. And so, knowing that, you then went out into the community and said, "Hey, I don't see what I need here, so I'm going to build it." Or
Yeah.
I'm going to partner with others who are kind of on the same journey, and we're going to build it. We're going to
Hmm.
build what this community needs instead of waiting for someone to come save us. And I think, I mentioned the white knuckling and the willpower and all of that kind of thing. But honestly, things changed for me when I did what you just referred to, which was doing the work to figure out what works for you with all of this generalized anxiety, a little bit of depression. We're here, we're there.
Hmm.
What I got to and found that was super helpful, and I will share it because in case it's helpful to someone else, when I changed my perspective on my health in general,
Hmm.
things shifted for me. And so I was always approaching it with this after the fact, what's the pill I can take, or the
Hmm.
fidget toy I can mess with, or the distraction I can put in my way to keep me, the urge is there, the
Hmm.
itch, the painful spot, the growing anxiety and tightness in my chest, it's all there. And I was trying to use all of these tools to help me not pull my hair after that was already there.
Right.
And so that was happening. And I had to just say, you know what, I can't do it anymore. I can't have not pulling as a goal for me. It's not working. Um,
Yeah.
and so addressing other things, suddenly, just like you, I realized, oh, wow, I'm struggling with some attention issues and I can't focus.
Mhm.
And every now and then my mood gets really high and then crashes down really low. Like
Right.
there were a lot of other things going on. And
Mhm.
depending on the therapist or psychiatrist I saw and how I presented, because that's important too in mental health, right? So we're going back and forth between all these different states. Did I show
Right.
up when I had been in bed for 3 weeks and couldn't get
Yeah.
up? And
Yeah.
so I presented and they said, "Oh, you're depressed." And they
Hmm.
give me, what you do for that. Or did I show up when I was being argumentative with everyone in my life and all of my relationships were kind of falling apart and I'm anxious and can't, I'm spinning? Well, then they're going to diagnose me with anxiety and they're
Yeah.
going to give me something for the anxiety.
Right.
If I'm hypomanic when I present, guess what? I get a bipolar diagnosis. They slap me with a mood disorder, with a mood stabilizer, and off I
Hmm.
go. Finally, about 8 years ago, I found the doctor I have now. She's a functional medicine provider, and she was the first one to say to me, "Your brain's unhappy."
Mm.
Like said it just like that, where because
Hmm.
I was just in tears, right? I can't take one more person telling me I have ADHD, I'm bipolar. No, there's no cure for trichotillomania. I was
Hmm.
just at my wit's end. And she got out her dry erase marker and her dry erase board and started mapping out the way hormones work and neurotransmitters work and how my diet is affecting my brain health and all of these things. And for me, the last time I felt this way was when I discovered the word trichotillomania.
Hmm.
And I was like, "Oh, this is a thing." When
Hmm.
she presented it to me in that way, where your brain is unhappy, let's go back to basics and let's give your brain a good foundation. I had already put the hair pulling in the back of, I started shaving my head. I found a hair solution. I have great wigs and have all these things. When I put that in the background and stopped worrying so much about the actual hair pulling, and
Yeah.
instead I started focusing on how I feel every day. Can I get
Hmm.
up every day and take a shower and take care of my home and go to work and take care of my kids and feel relatively happy with a stable mood and good energy levels? If I can do that and I'm sleeping pretty well, if I'm doing
Hmm.
all of that, I'm winning.
Right.
Forget the hair. And then
Right.
what I found over time was when that was my approach, when I had taken that off the table and I knew there wasn't a pill for that, and I instead started focusing on my physical and emotional health,
Hmm.
suddenly some of that stuff started to work its way out.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was happening outside of a psychiatrist's office.
Mm.
It was happening in my doctor's office, and quite frankly, most of it was happening in my kitchen and in my gym and outside on my streets.
Hmm.
Um, you said something else about medication that I thought was really important, how there wasn't a pill for your trichotillomania, but when you started taking medication for some of your other comorbid conditions, suddenly you could get yourself to a place that was acceptable to you, right? And so it
Right.
created this space. For me, being on a medication isn't about the hair pulling. Being on the medication opens up the space for me to use the tools that are
Right.
in my toolbox to keep my brain happy. And that's
Exactly.
it. It's not
Yeah.
rocket science for me. It's
Yeah.
not, it's complex.
Hmm.
It's work. Not everybody wants to do it. A
Yeah.
lot of people are waiting that people want to take the pill or no, I'm not going to do that. And you are well within your rights, just like you're well
Yeah.
within your rights to not tell your story, to not join in community.
Hmm.
We all have to approach our health in the way that makes the most sense for us. Um, but you have to do the work if you want the feeling
Right.
of your life, of having control over your life.
Yeah. And I think that's spot on. That's something my therapist told me because I was, for many people, when medication was kind of first put on the table for me, I was always someone like you when I was younger. I was like, oh, would love to try medication. Then there was a good chunk of my life where it wasn't really on my radar. And then I went to like student health services at my school now where I'm finishing up my PhD, and she kind of the doctor talked to me about medication, and it was this thing where I was like, oh, huh, interesting. Like now it feels like I have someone who is like ready to prescribe this, but now I feel very like I'm pushing up against this because what does it mean for me, Saharra Dixon, to take medication? Like what am I admitting to myself? What am I admitting to other
Mm.
people? But when I spoke with my therapist, who was not attached to the college system at all, this was just a standalone therapist. They said just what you said. Medication for me was, there is no medication that's going to completely get rid of your bipolar, schizophrenia, anxiety, ADHD, but it allows you to open up yourself more to using the tools that you are gaining, maybe in therapy, maybe with your doctor, to really live the life that aligns with your goals and your values. And that for me has been wildly fun. It's been an interesting journey, and I recently got back on my antidepressants after kind of going on a bit of a hiatus. I was coming off of some of birth control, so I wanted to kind of just see what the effects of coming off the birth control was for the PMDD aspect of my life. And I'm on this new I'm on this new wellness journey. I'm not like the biggest like fitness person, I'm not going to the gym, but I try to go for a walk for about 30 minutes to an hour every day. And so what I was noticing, I was like, I'm taking these antidepressants. I'm also going on these walks. Sometimes I was going on them with my sister, so we would have like nice, cute little sister chats. And
Yeah.
I was realizing, I was like, I feel really great. Like this is the first time, even despite losing my job, even despite still hair pulling, even despite working on this taxing dissertation, like this is probably the first time in my life here at the prime age of 30 that, I feel great,
Yeah.
and I think it really does attest to this idea of what you're saying, kind of giving your brain the foundation to succeed and giving your brain the chance to succeed. So I want to kind of switch gears here because I know this is maybe the catalyst for Jen and Banu Wellness. So tell me
Yeah.
a little bit about Jen and Banu Wellness and what was the catalyst for that?
Yeah, so in terms of my professional background, I have a degree in communication, and my first kind of entry level, let's just answer some want ads and find ourselves a job after college, happened to be an administrative job in a large urban health center. So I just landed into healthcare
Mm-hmm.
and started learning it from the ground up. I'm pulling files and helping doctors be able to take certain types of insurance. But from the ground up, learning how complicated our healthcare system is, how difficult it is to practice medicine, um, how complicated health insurance is, and how many people don't have access to it. So that was the first 5 years of my career, was doing that type of work. And then we started moving around, and I went to grad school and got a master's degree in health policy. And that kind of got me farther down into the rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the perspective of, I wanted to work kind of in, or saw myself working more in nonprofit or public health. Was when I got the master's degree, is what I thought I would do. I was living in Atlanta at the time and thought the CDC or the Georgia Department of Public Health, that was where I thought I would end up. And
Mm-hmm.
it turned out at the time that biotech companies that were coming to market with pharmaceutical products, for certain disease states, they needed a community component. They needed people that were out there on the ground level at health fairs, at public health departments, in community-based organizations, helping people get tested,
Mm-hmm.
identifying risk factors, and getting people into specialty care.
Right.
So that's how I fell into a 15-year career chasing disease states. So
Mm-hmm.
my entire career became people who had inflammatory conditions, rare kinds of oncology, viral conditions. I would work to solve their problems with medication. That was helping them access and afford their medications. And it's great work. And I worked with some of the smartest, most committed to the future of health
Right.
people that I've ever worked with. So I always want to be careful about that, about how much I respect the people who are doing the work of trying to find the next great
Yeah.
medication. But over time, my professional journey started to kind of parallel my personal journey with trichotillomania and all the comorbid conditions, where I started shifting my personal perspective on, wouldn't prevention be a much better way to go than
Mm-hmm.
treating the condition after you already have it? So we were
Mm-hmm.
chasing symptoms. That's all we were
Right.
doing. We were trying to make
Right.
people feel better by taking medications that oftentimes cause them all sorts of other side effects.
Yeah.
And so 3 years ago, my last patient advocacy role ended,
Mm.
and I was able to pause and ask myself, what did I want to do next? And it became very clear that it was important to me how I spend my time. It
Mm.
was important to me how I live my life in this healthy way, to keep myself in this kind of prevention green zone so that I don't find myself in the middle of a 2-hour trance in front of the mirror. That became so important to me. And the corporate life I was living was just not conducive anymore. It
Yeah.
was too high stress. There was too much travel. It was not work I related to or aligned with my values. And so it became harder and harder to do. And when I took that break, I started thinking about what would it look like if I did something on my own. And
Mm,
when I found myself about 7, 8 years ago starting to come up on recovery, and I know what that journey looked like. I know what an 8 year commitment to finding the right recovery path, what that looked like for me. And so suddenly I was thinking, I know a lot about the healthcare system. I have these credentials. I have 15, 20 years of patient advocacy experience. And now I have a real point of view
mm,
on prevention, on doing the things that keep our brains happy.
yeah.
And I became called to see if I can help the community in a way maybe we're not thinking about it, right? I took a look at what's out there, right? We have so many people telling our stories and creating these supportive environments for people to meet and have support groups and do those kinds of things. We have
Right.
tools that help us raise awareness. So the teenagers and kids that don't even realize they're in the trance, suddenly now they have, a bracelet that can help them like, oh, I'm doing it, right? So we
Right.
have people working on this from a number of different angles. And when I look at my expertise and my point of view, it became clear to me that what I want to do is help people build healthier lives, become clear on their wellness vision, put together health teams that work
Mm,
for them, and get them to a place where when they're in their mid 40s, they're looking back on their life and being like, wow, it took nothing for me.
right.
My life owes me nothing.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that's the goal, that's the work. And so I launched Jen and Mbanu Wellness. I got a health coaching certification from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And so it was kind of my effort to, okay, I have a lot of substantive knowledge and a lot of lived experience. Um,
Yeah.
but coaching's different, right? And what's coaching? Why do people need me to tell them to not eat so much sugar, to get out and take a walk, and to spend
Yeah.
time with people they love? This is not
Right.
rocket science. You don't need me to say it. What we've noticed, though, is having the knowledge and actually executing it in your daily life without an accountability partner, without
Mhm.
someone that helps you build that toolbox and gives you a sense of what tool to pull when,
Mhm.
without kind of spending some time really thinking about that and getting clear. People have the knowledge, but they don't do it.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
found that in my personal life, one of my very good friends is a personal trainer, and she had offered to do some training with me. This was a couple of years ago, and I needed to get some more exercise, so I signed up for it and paid her for a period of time, and she trained me, and I got in pretty good shape and was feeling better and all of the things. So I decided, do I really need to be paying Polly? We were going through, I wasn't working anymore. My husband was
Yeah.
considering a shift. We were looking for ways we could kind of, save money a little bit. And that was the first luxury to go was
Mhm.
I don't need somebody. I now know the workouts. I can do it.
Yeah.
Ask me how many times I showed up myself on my own accord and followed through with that 30-minute strength training workout. Not very often, certainly not 2 times a week.
Right.
And so guess what? Polly's my trainer again.
Yeah.
I needed, and maybe some people don't, right? If you are a self-driven person and you just want to like check in with me to see what do I think are the pillars of a healthy life and you are going to just go off on your own and do it, I think that's amazing. I have found for myself that I can read and consume information and have all the substantive knowledge. But sometimes if I don't have an accountability partner, whether it's a friend, whether it's your partner, whether it's an app, whether you hire a coach, something that keeps you on track and keeps you showing up for yourself week after week after week.
Right.
And so I'm trying to figure out now this balance between being a very real part of this community where I've have this lived experience and I want to be a part of maintaining access and making sure that people have all the tools, while also all of us are trying to build, lives and careers and pay bills. And so that's where it came to the point of maybe this is a business opportunity. Maybe this is a place for people who are in the weeds and don't know where to turn next. Be a part of building a ton of free resources and access points and ways for us to join in community. But also, if you find yourself wanting that little bit of extra help, the help is out there.
Right.
And I use coaches and I've learned how to be a coach. And I think it's just another tool that's available to people.
Right.
If you decide that prevention and getting your brain in a healthy place is a better idea than letting your brain be unhappy and trying to white knuckle your way through a craving or a pulling episode.
Yeah. 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 I mean, my background is in public health, and so we share very similar sentiments and values as it relates to kind of really wanting to kind of bolster up prevention versus just focusing on symptoms. And sometimes you have to kind of still focus on the symptoms, but at the end of the day, as someone who also is a public health girly, it really is important for me to really look at the holistic nature of what conditions are set and what conditions can we set for ourselves, for our community, for the environment, for society that will make kind of the healthy choice the easier choice. And
You nailed that. You nailed that.
and
Yeah,
so
you understand that systemic kind of, you
mhm,
got to put the structures in place that make it
mhm,
easier to make easy choice to make healthy choices. And right
right.
now we are not setting it up for people to be able to make healthy choices.
Yeah, yeah. So I do a lot of work with health equity, but I want to kind of pivot to health coaching because I started, so when I was doing my undergrad, I got my bachelor's in health behavior science with a minor in public health. And I took like one graduate class, and it was motivational interviewing, which kind of sat in the health coaching graduate certificate program that we have. So it was very centered on like health coaching. And so that was my first introduction to health coaching. And then I started kind of dibbling and dabbling maybe 2, 3 years ago in health coaching as it relates to BFRBs and mental health in general. I decided to kind of put that on the back burner just as I'm like working on Club Imani and then also my PhD. But I do see it kind of coming up in my life, maybe later again, maybe once I'm a little bit older, have a little bit more, have established my career a little bit more. But with that being said, as someone who's kind of dibbled and dabbed, and I've had a few clients here and there, sometimes you can get the sense as a health coach, especially when you're in the mental health realm. People are a little maybe hesitant. They're kind of like, what can a health coach do versus me like seeing a therapist? And also, there are some health coaches out there that really do kind of tote themselves as these kind of quasi therapists. But
Yeah.
I know you and I know people like me, we're not doing that. But in that realm, how would you kind of differentiate health coaching and therapy? And what would you maybe say to someone who's a little skeptical about trying
Yeah.
health coaching?
Yeah, fabulous question. And I will say that from a personal perspective, just so that everybody knows, I have a primary care provider whose advice I take. I have a psychiatrist who prescribes the medication that I take. And I have a therapist that when I'm struggling with things, I find myself in difficult periods of life, I check back in with her and we have several sessions. And I've worked with her for years. It took a long time to build that team, and it's something I got pretty good at, and it's something I feel really comfortable with helping and
Yeah.
guiding other people as they put together their team. But you bring
Mhm.
up such a good point, how important it is that we stay in our lanes. And so I am not a medical doctor. I am not a dietitian, a registered dietitian. I'm not a personal trainer.
Yeah.
I'm a person who understands that translating the prescriptions from the doctor's office and the psychiatrist's office and your therapist's couch are often very challenging. And often
Mhm.
what's missing is someone to kind of hold space and zoom out. And whereas therapy is kind of looking at maybe the past and working through things and then helping you build tools so that you can move forward in your daily life and be much more successful in that way. I would look at a health coach as coming in and saying, okay, number one, if you don't have a qualified healthcare team, you should get one.
Yeah.
So let's start there. I am not the person that is going to tell you how to eat and tell you how to move and tell you how to solve all your relationship problems because that's
Mhm.
outside of my lane. What I can do is help you form that team, help you advocate for yourself, prepare for those appointments so that when you go in and they've got 10 to 15 minutes, and I hope I've steered you towards a provider that has more than 10 or 15
Yeah.
minutes, but that you have your questions and your checklist and you know what you're looking for in a provider. And once you have that team together and you're here with your prescriptions, right? You're supposed to eat in this way and they'd like you to get a little more exercise. You could probably stand to lower your blood sugar and XYZ. Well, now we're going to take that and we're going to start having conversations and I'm going to be holding space so that you can solve your own problems, right?
Hmm.
You don't need, this is what I need everyone to understand. If I'm going to say one piece of wisdom, we are
Hmm.
all in charge of our own health and our own situations. And we have to be the captains of those ships. And so but it's important sometimes to have those accountability partners that can help us translate that into our daily
Hmm.
life. So if you have someone that can ask you those high mileage questions and do that motivational interviewing and help you get really clear on exactly what your goal is, and then
Hmm.
help you take those consistent steps to get yourself closer and to check in and say, hey, how's it going? Sometimes being seen and having someone hold space and having someone help you figure out how to translate that
Yeah.
um, goes a long way. But I could not
Yeah.
agree with you more. The antenna go up all the time, you know, when I kind of see some people online, or I even have spoken with some coaches, and it's kind of we all need to recognize that our niche or the thing that we're working on is not the only thing. Do I think
Mhm.
I can cure or even treat bipolar disorder with kale and broccoli? No, no, I don't.
Right.
What I do know is that pay attention. You noticed that when you weren't active and then suddenly you started just working in gentle movement that involved getting some fresh air and a pleasant conversation with your sister, suddenly
Mm.
you felt better. And what I encourage people to do is start tracking that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't need me to do that. You can wake up and for 3 days or 7 days, track everything you eat, how you're moving your body, all the things that are going on, how you're sleeping, and then just pay
Hmm.
attention. Was your mood better on the days that you got outside and took a walk?
Hmm.
Was
Yeah.
your mood a little more even the couple of days that you watched your sugar and weren't
Yeah.
constantly snacking and letting your blood sugar, go through the roof and then crash back down? It's
Yeah.
these types of things that health coaches help you kind of pay attention to and track,
Right.
and then bring some of that actionable advice and hold you
Right.
accountable.
Right.
And if
Which,
anyone's trying to sell you something, if anyone's trying to tell you they can cure it, they can solve it, you'll be
yeah.
full free. That's where I get a little. So,
Yeah.
so what's my promise? I'm struggling there because in health
Mm.
coaching, you want to have a deliverable. You want to have something that at the end of the program, people can walk away and yes, I got what I paid for. And that's
Mm.
tricky when what you're selling is, don't you just want to feel better?
Hmm.
Don't
Hmm.
you, if you just for 6 weeks lived in and you
Yeah.
just made a couple little shifts, don't you want to see how much your mood would improve, how much the medication you're taking maybe works a little better?
Yeah.
Maybe you can taper off it even. Like that's done in a therapist's office and under the close
Yeah.
watch of your physician. But I think there are a lot of ways that as coaches and as support people, we can help translate the registered dietitians, the
Hmm.
therapist, the psychiatrist, the doctor. Those are the people you're looking to help you design your protocol. But can you leave the doctor's office and go home and consistently make those changes?
Yeah. Ugh, that just renewed my love for health coaching.
Oh, yay. Then I
Um,
accomplished one thing.
yeah, I genuinely, and because of all the reasons that you said, I do think health coaches definitely have a place as a part of someone's healthcare team, especially if they can really afford it, or if they know it's not necessarily like, I don't know, kind of reframing things as like this isn't necessarily like this isn't necessarily a like, oh, pick and choose. I think health coaches, whether they call themselves health coaches or not, I think a lot of nurses do health coaching even still. I think there's a lot of clinicians that do health coaching work. But I think there is value in having a dedicated health coach on your team who maybe isn't bogged down by having to go take vitals and do all this and then kind of sort of do health coaching on the side. I think there is value to have like dedicated health coaches, maybe in the healthcare setting, maybe in as a part of a doctor's office, or standalone health coaches such as yourself. Because really, when you think about, like you said, pulling everything together, what my therapist says, what my doctor says, what my nutritionist says, um, there is a level of accountability that sometimes we lack. And also, it's just nice to have someone that you can talk to a little bit more dedicatedly about, you can kind of take this 15-minute conversation with my doctor and take this like bi-weekly conversation that I have with my therapist and really turn it into actionable steps. And so, yeah, I
Exactly.
mean, yeah, I love health
Yeah.
coaching. And I think it is really important. Now, switching gears here, I have about two more questions, but switching gears here, um, sometimes health coaching can feel a bit like a luxury for folks, right? Just in terms of price point and what have you. And
Yeah.
so a lot of health coaches, maybe that I know, or even myself, when I'm kind of doing research about it, a while back, were kind of thinking about like community partnerships. And so I wanted to kind of pose to you as a health coach, and I know you just recently launched Jen and Mbanu Wellness, but
Yeah.
have you thought about what excites you, or what future collaborations might look like with community organizations or healthcare systems? I can say Club Imani, for example, but truly
Yeah.
any type of organization where you feel like, in addition to kind of having one-on-one clients, do you feel like there's other ways that you can kind of leverage your expertise, for folks who maybe might not have the
Yeah.
whatever it is to kind of work weekly with you, or even in general, even if it's not you, maybe just health coaches in general, if there's someone who's interested in health coaching or who's interested in being a health coach,
Yeah.
are there ways to kind of think about being in the community and serving the community as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, it's why the first thing I did in the weeks and months leading up to launching was to have conversations, and you were one of them, having conversations with people because, yeah, trying to figure out who's in the space already doing really great work.
Right.
And what is a message that we can share with that community? And what's a way we can make sure that there's access in a broad
Mhm.
way? So you brought up kind of two different things that I'd like to address. And I don't have a view of a clock. So make sure you keep me. Um,
Yeah, you're
okay.
good.
Okay. But on the one hand, we have the question of the value of coaching, right? We have is that worth it? Or I don't have that kind of money that I would spend on a friend for hire kind of thing, like whatever, however you want to kind of phrase that. And so we have work to do on that side, just in terms of what are the kind of things that you're currently spending money on to manage your mental health condition that maybe aren't as
Yeah,
productive or conducive or things? And I
yeah,
can name off the top of my head my five or six, in addition to how
right,
much I spend on wigs, how much I spend on, any of the makeup you're using to cover things up, the things you're putting on your nails, the things you're using so that it lets you know when you're, about to pull.
right,
There are all these things. Your, $6 coffee that's full of sugar and caffeine and your nervous system doesn't need
right,
it anyway. Take that out for a
right.
month and let's see. So part of the
Exactly.
job of a health coach is to help people see the value and reframe the way they're spending their healthcare dollars. And so
Mhm.
for me, I pay a lot more now for my functional medicine provider who doesn't take my insurance. And I don't recommend that. And that's not where I'm steering people. I'm just using it as an example of it became worth it. I was spending money on so much stuff that was making me feel miserable that
Mm.
it totally made sense to me to reroute those dollars to people and things that could help me get myself out of that hole. So I just want to say that it doesn't answer your larger question, but I do want people to really be thinking about
Yeah, no, it's valuable.
the
Yeah.
value of it, right? But that having been said, I see 100% an opportunity to partner with organizations like yours where we're donating coaching time, right? And so there's a way, I mean, there are people who are donating products, services, time, volunteer, that kind of thing. So excuse me, in one way I can see where for events or for, fundraising or in some way where you can kind of have a situation where there are people who get access to coaching
Mhm.
regardless of ability to pay. I think the other probably bigger way is I'm not safeguarding or gatekeeping any health information. There's
Right,
no world where I'm giving you a tiny bit of what I think nutrition and movement and sleep should look like. And the
right.
rest, you're going to have to pay me in order for me to tell you
Yeah,
what is, by the way, widely and publicly available information a lot
yeah,
of the time. I've
yeah.
just done a lot of the work to consume a lot of this information and to put it into a program and a
Mhm.
protocol that might work for some people. But I think doing webinars or event, speaking at conferences, doing things where we've picked a topic and we've got the audience and we go in on it and I tell people exactly step by step what I did to get myself to where I say I'm in recovery now. And
Mhm.
what I've learned professionally, both in my coaching certification and in my practice. And so I think there's a world for me to be sharing all kinds of case studies, having
Yeah,
conversations with other practitioners. If there are other people in the space that are dealing in nutrition or movement or nervous system regulation or reducing our toxic load, I would love to have a conversation with people where we're kind of talking through some of those issues, and it's free to tune in. Nobody's charging you to tune into the webinar, that kind of thing. So I think
yeah.
whether it's from figuring out how to disperse information widely
Hmm.
to finding a way to donate or scale coaching services, and then for a lot of people struggling with mental health, helping them reframe the value of coaching to begin with,
Yeah.
and the benefit that it can provide. So I think there's tons of opportunity for collaboration. And honestly, you and others like you who are running these organizations, you are probably in a better position to propose to me,
Yeah.
what a collab would look like. And I'll just say that I'm highly open to all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you bring up, I mean, before I get into my last nugget, my last question, this idea of how we of being more attuned with how we are spending our healthcare dollars. I don't think we as Americans and as people who live in this mega consumerist
Yeah.
capitalist kind of society, we kind of just throw our dollars because we're expected to throw our dollars, but actually taking a pause to be like, how am I spending my money? Who is it impacting? How is it impacting people, including
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
and what am I leveraging with my healthcare dollars? And like, even though it's not the same. I remember when we were doing our first fundraiser, um, I think in like a caption, I was like, hey, instead of that $10 coffee, why don't you consider donating $10 this week for Club Imani? And especially and other times when I was running other nonprofits, but it's this idea of really kind of reframing, how we are spending our money and truly in the long term, how does it benefit us? And if we are truly people who want to kind of step into being more in community with people and being better versions of ourselves, really have to kind of taking a hard look in the mirror and being like, how does my money factor into this? Because unfortunately, at the end of the day, we are in a very capitalist
Yep.
society. And like you said, reframing the value of health coaching, I think is super, super, super important. And so seeing people like you who I know are like this is their calling, and they're not doing this to kind of be facetious or you know provide a cure or what have you, really just kind of helping be a bridge builder, if you will,
Yeah.
between clinicians and really seeing the results that you might want to see. Um,
Yeah. Are
and
you?
I
Oh,
think, no, no, I was just gonna say, I think, a lot of that does come with kind of getting getting you out there or getting the health coach out there. And maybe it is, doing conversations like this, for example. I know for me, I kind of think of it as kind of doing conferences for, talking about my dissertation and stuff like that, where it's like, hey, like I'm kind of giving you the step by step of how to do this thing, and then maybe you can come talk to me and we can have a more formal relationship and we can collaborate one on one or what have you. But I really do. yeah, I just love everything that you're saying, and I think it really, really is important. And when we're thinking of folks of color or just folks coming from multi-ethnic, multicultural backgrounds, as well as maybe more minoritized backgrounds, whatever that might mean, queer, person of color, truly whatever. I think there is a benefit in looking at more holistic ways of being and living because the healthcare system has historically really done a lot of harm. And so having someone like you, for example, who can really kind of hold our hands and be like, hey, there's another way to look at this. There's another way to think about this. And I'm going to show you how. And you know, and there's just I feel like there really is a benefit to and this is work that we've always been doing in our culture and even similar to kind of like doula work, right? This is work that we've been doing, but it's really nice to kind of see people doing it more um systematically and with a little bit more care and a little bit more science science
Yeah.
back to it. So yeah,
Yeah.
really love that. And
Yeah, I so appreciate that. And I think the best part about this is it puts us back in the driver's seat.
right,
Is the whole thing, right? That most of health, I mean, what people are talking about now in health is that most of health happens in our kitchens and in
right,
our backyards and in our kitchen, at our tables with our families, but we're continuing to show up in providers' offices who we're trained in a certain way, have a very limited amount of time for us, and we want them to solve all of our problems. And
right,
so, just this conversation, I mean, we could have gone off on a couple of different, I mean, you brought up
right.
consumerism and the environment and being better stewards. It's like, yeah, okay, so if I'm talking to you about your sleep habits and you tell me you're scrolling Instagram for 3 hours every night when you probably should have, turned it off and all of those things, and how many ads did you click on or
Right,
see, and how many things did you actually buy, through
right,
that process? So let's start focusing on your sleep. You stop all the consumerism,
right.
you're a better steward, and suddenly you're directing your dollars in a better way. But the bigger part being that yes, hire experts to
Yeah.
show you the path, but then know that ultimately you are in charge
Hmm.
and you have the power
Yeah.
to create whatever life you want. And if you don't, we have choices. We
Yeah.
have choices. And I think the work that you and I are doing as advocates, as public health practitioners, I think the work is helping people reframe
Yeah.
to commit to their health, to know that it makes a difference. The choices they're making every single day,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
are making a difference. And if we can get people to kind of shift that, and they can do the work on their own, or they can, have accountability partners. But I think you're absolutely right that if we care about this community that we're a part of, we need to find a way to make this kind of thing as accessible, as
Hmm.
widely as accessible as possible, while also putting value on the work that we're doing every day.
Right.
You're getting a PhD. This is a lot of work. I assume there was some investment involved. At the end
Yeah.
of the day, you're going to need somebody to see value in the work that you
Right.
bring.
Right.
And it's just a matter of, yeah, you got to show up every day and you got to show the value. And then you got to, align with the vision and help as many people as you can.
Yeah. Yes. Excellent conversation. We could go
Yeah.
on forever, but unfortunately, time is escaping. So with that
Hour
being
passed.
said, my last question for you is if you had one nugget, one piece of information that you would want our Club Imani members and community members to know or walk away with, what gem would you leave them with?
I would tell your community that they should see themselves as architects.
Mm,
They are architects building every day with their choices, with their actions, with what they consume,
mm,
both digitally and otherwise. We're making choices every day and we're putting building blocks one on top of another. And you get to wake up every single day and decide what kind of day am I going to have? What
mm,
choices am I going to make? And we can start to watch those choices add up. And over time, we've designed this big, beautiful life that, guess what? We've thrown a lot of acronyms and comorbidities around and all the letters and things that people want us to take in and absorb about ourselves. And at the end of the day, did trichotillomania take anything from either of us other than a few years of discomfort and shame and some hurdles that we had to get over? It didn't take anything from my beautiful life, and it doesn't seem as though it's taken anything from yours. So I think that's the message, is if you
Yeah.
don't feel that way about your life, if you're 19 right now, or you're 26 right now, or you're 32 right now, and you can't see a way out, you didn't know other people had this, you don't understand why you can't stop, find community, find
Yeah.
the people. There are lighthouses in the storm, and find community, find support, and become the architect.
Yeah. I love that. Become the architect. I think that is
Yes,
such a nice little slogan as we close things out. Jen, thank you so much for this invaluable conversation. I can't wait to share it with our community. I hope you also find value in sharing this with yours. And
absolutely.
we hope that we can continue collaborating and being in community with each other, as we, have share similar values and visions and missions in life, and just helping people become architects of their own lives and curators of their own well-being. And so I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
I hope you have a great rest of your week and rest of your season.
Yes, we will be talking soon. I know we'll all be in community. This is just the beginning. There's a lot of work to do, and we're just getting started.
Yes. All righty.
All right.
Take care.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.